afraid I'd skin you alive. For your own good, of course.
I'm just going for a walk in the lake.
Oh, what a wonderful day!
A dating agency brings some spice to the gruesome lives of Rick Mail and Ade Edmondson, whose new series of Bottom is showing now on 2.
Let me go!
Look, I told you. Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you.
But less than half an hour later, he held Sarah down by her throat and raped her in the car.
After a second victim came forward, a Crimewatch appeal was made with impressive results.
Colin Kelly, there are 2 charges against you. You do not have to say anything unless you wish to do so, or whatever you say may be given in evidence.
That's Crimewatch File in half an hour.
First, the 9 o'clock news on BBC1 with Michael Burke.
The Prime Minister has committed Britain to early ratification of the Maastricht Treaty. He said Parliament will approve the measures for closer European unity at the end of the year. And there's to be no pardon for Derek Bentley. His sister says the campaign will go on. Good evening. The Prime Minister has decided to press on with British ratification of the Maastricht Treaty on closer European Union. He said Parliament will be asked to approve it by Christmas or immediately after. Mr Major also called a halt to what he described as the war of words between Britain and Germany over who was responsible for sterling having to drop out of the European exchange rate mechanism. The Foreign Office called in the German ambassador today over the release of a document from the Bundesbank which said it had done everything it could to rescue the pound, and what happened was the British government's fault. Here's our political editor, John Cole.
The Prime Minister today decided he needed to get a grip on a party crisis that was spinning out of control. At a political session of the Cabinet, with civil servants excluded, he went round the table and ensured that every minister endorsed his own decision to drive the Maastricht Bill through the Commons. After his talks with other European leaders this week, he's abandoned previous procrastination. At the Birmingham summit later this month, he hopes to get broad declarations to satisfy the Danes and mollify the less irreconcilable Tory rebels. But he knows a cut-and-dried solution is impossible. So he staked his reputation on getting the bill through.
Yes, I think a number of things have been clearer as a result of my discussions over the last few days. We've been looking at a number of matters. Firstly, what might come out of the Birmingham summit. And I think there is a good chance of getting a declaration that will address many of the concerns that people have across Europe. Secondly, after last evening's discussion, it's much clearer how Denmark are going to proceed to deal with their problems. So I think in the light of that, after the Birmingham summit, if it proves to be successful, we will then have a further debate on Maastricht. We promised a debate in principle about the matter some time ago, and then we will proceed to the bill.
And will that all be before Christmas?
I'm not sure whether the bill will be before Christmas. There's a great deal of business, but it will either be before Christmas or immediately after. It is certainly the intention to pass the Maastricht Bill during this session of Parliament.
Does that mean that you will apply a 3-line whip, and do you expect to have to rely on opposition votes to get the bill through?
This is a government bill. It's a bill that was in the election manifesto. It's a bill that's had second reading. It will certainly be a government bill, and we will apply the whip appropriately.
During the summer, the ranks of Conservative MPs opposed to Maastricht have swollen, and today's decision will cause immediate turbulence.
And it's obviously very critical that we in the British Parliament should be able to go through the bill and the treaty line by line. And there's a lot in that treaty that at the moment I find it unacceptable unless it's actually qualified in terms of its statements in a way that is acceptable to the British people, my constituents.
But on past experience, Tory rebellions rarely live up to their advanced billing, and Euro enthusiasts were relieved by John Major's new line.
And I believe that the House of Commons will enthusiastically support it once they are faced with the need to make a decision.
The Labour Party decided this was the moment to call for Norman Lamont's resignation. At their conference, Gordon Brown read out an emergency statement.
In the light of the continuing deterioration in our economy, this conference demands that the Prime Minister replaces his discredited Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Norman Lamont had scoffed at a question about resignation. The Prime Minister is markedly keener on being at the heart of Europe than his Chancellor, but their reputations now hang together.
The Chancellor of the Exchequer has been Chancellor during a period in which inflation has come down from nearly 11% to just over 3.5%. It's now at a very low level and shows signs of staying there. That is fundamental to the future health of the British economy. What occurred on the markets a few days ago would have occurred whomsoever was Chancellor, and I do not recall in earlier times the Labour Party or anybody else opposing our membership of the exchange rate mechanism.
So you intend to stick to this Chancellor?
The Chancellor's got a job to do. He's getting on and he's doing it.
The German ambassador Baron von Richthofen was today hauled over the coals at the Foreign Office because the leaking of the Bundesbank account of events made yesterday the most embarrassing day the British government has endured since the Black Wednesday of devaluation. John Major decided to pursue it no further.
I think it is time to draw a line underneath this war of words with Germany. Germany have made it clear today that they regret the publication of the documentation, and I'm happy to accept that expression of regret. I think what we need to do now is to put that episode behind us and look at the important matters, getting inflation down, keeping it down, and putting ourselves in the position to produce proper growth back in the British economy.
But John Smith is not satisfied with the clash of evidence between Frankfurt and London over whether or not Britain was offered a realignment of the pound before devaluation.
Well, he says he wants to bring an end to the war of words, but it's not a war of words, it's a deep disagreement about the facts. Now, the Bundesbank made very clear and specific allegations about the conduct of the British government. None of these have been in any way answered by the Prime Minister, and it's totally inadequate that he should say it should now be brought to an end. He hasn't answered anything, and he ought now to make a full statement and not try and brush this matter aside under the carpet, because it's too serious to be dealt with like that.
Tonight, Douglas Hurd, the Cabinet's senior Euro enthusiast, acknowledged that Britain could not rejoin the exchange rate mechanism until it is reviewed and the strains on sterling subside. The Prime Minister had told me Britain would not rejoin in the foreseeable future, but the Foreign Secretary gave a warning that we must not delay too long.
But those who, in the excitement of the moment, would turn their back on European monetary cooperation, choosing my words with care, have to weigh the risks of combinations forming on the continent, perhaps in a year or two, rather than now, which would gradually drain the strength away from our financial sector.
The Prime Minister is seeking to contain his backbench revolt by playing tough on the Maastricht Bill and playing for time on the exchange rate mechanism. He may well achieve his party objective, but the anxiety of some in both party and government is that European economic and monetary union will go ahead too swiftly for Britain to catch up.
The row with the Bundesbank caused widespread embarrassment in Germany as well as Britain. It began last night with the publication of a note from the Bundesbank president. The Financial Times was given a version of the note last night by the German embassy in London. This morning, the Bundesbank said it was a mistake. It shouldn't have been made public. In it, the Bundesbank president, Helmut Schlesinger, denied triggering the sterling crisis by hinting that the pound should be devalued. He also denied helping the French franc more than sterling, and he implied that Britain caused the crisis by letting sterling fall too low before acting. In response, the Bank of England said, "We do not entirely recognise this version of events." And in a written comment approved by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, the Treasury said the Bundesbank had made undermining statements about the pound. This afternoon, the Bundesbank said its note had been intended for publication after all, but it regretted any misunderstanding, which cannot be in our interests.
Chancellor Kohl greeted his cabinet 10 years to the day since he came to power. The latest row with Britain, an unwelcome intrusion.
Do you agree with the Bundesbank that it's the British government...
Surely, but today it's another day. We have 10 years that the Chancellor is in his office, and that's more important.
At first, the Bundesbank said the leaked document was only a briefing paper for the German ambassador in London, not intended for publication. But as the partying began for the 10th anniversary, after the Foreign Ministry backed Baron von Richthofen, saying they knew he'd released the paper, the Bundesbank line changed, and tonight they say the statement was intended to counter criticism by the Bank of England and clearly earmarked for the British press.
Was it a mistake?
As Germany's finance ministers continue to avoid public comment, the defence minister gave this response.
I'm not going to go into detail. Of course, it's a difficult time for many countries in Europe, for Germany, the reunification, for Britain and for others with regard to the economic and financial situation. But I think there are enough politicians on both sides that have a cool head and will make sure that the relations remain good.
Chancellor Kohl's spokesman said this storm will blow over.
I regret, of course, that there is angry mood in London. He regrets that. But I think it's not so important thing if the German embassy gives a paper or argues on the basis of a paper.
Chancellor Kohl's focus today was on his vision of a united Europe.
Oder die Franzosen, oder die Briten, versteht nichts von Geschichte.
Anyone who believes that any country, France, Britain or Germany, can stand alone understands nothing of history. But amid the celebrations, the publication of an interview by his finance minister admitting plans for a European Deutschmark zone, an inner financial circle to include France, but leaving Britain firmly on the outside. As Germany's political and cultural elite celebrate 10 years of Chancellor Kohl, it now seems that whatever the best intentions of the government, mending bridges with Britain will be difficult. And ending the war of words will take all of the personal relationship established between Chancellor Kohl and John Major when the two men meet soon. David Loyne, BBC News, Bonn.
Business leaders here have again insisted that the government must produce a coherent economic strategy. On a day when more job losses were announced, they said it was time the government took the lead in reviving British industry. The pound was under pressure again on the foreign exchanges. It finished 2 3/4 pfennigs lower at just over 2 marks 48.
The row between the Bundesbank and the Treasury reverberated around the foreign exchanges today. It served to remind dealers that the pound has no anchor outside the ERM. As sterling hit new lows, one economist described the mood.
Concern, uncertainty, belief that the government really has not yet got a formulated economic policy, and therefore the market is going to drift.
It's not just the city that's concerned. The government's friends in industry are becoming increasingly impatient with what they see as policy dither.
We think that it's very important for the government to give some leadership at the moment to industry, and we've not only got to address the short-term problems of high interest rates and the fact that having come out of the ERM we have no monetary or economic policy worth the name. We've also got to persuade the government to begin to address the underlying weaknesses of British manufacturing industry.
Ultimately, the strength of the economy, the strength of the exchange rate, the strength of the country, the credibility of not just the government but the country, depends on the volume of business we're able to do.
While industry worries, the toll of job losses mounts. Cadbury's today said it was shedding 450 jobs, but that was only one of a series of announcements adding up to almost 2,000 job losses. VSEL, the Barrow shipbuilder, is shedding nearly 400, another blow to a hard-hit area.
There was a forlorn hope that the government would act to stop the economic slide in this country and have announced measures that would have injected some confidence, some hope to Britain's manufacturing industry. It's failed to happen.
Over the course of 3 years, we'll have seen a reduction of over 1/3 employees in engineering and manufacturing. And let's not forget that those are the people and those are the industries who provide the powerhouse and the wealth-generating sector of this country's economy.
The Treasury says more time is needed to flesh out the detail of policy, although the overall goal of beating inflation is unchanged. But in the meantime, the recession drags on. The confusion and uncertainty about government policy is growing daily. The Prime Minister said little that was new today, and a statement is still awaited from the Chancellor. Industry and the city want to know what's going to happen to interest rates, but the more a decision is delayed, the more the pound slides, and that itself is narrowing the government's options.
The Home Secretary, Kenneth Clarke, has refused a posthumous pardon for Derek Bentley, the teenager hanged 40 years ago for the murder of a policeman. He also rejected a public inquiry into the case. But Mr. Clarke said he would have reprieved Bentley if he'd been Home Secretary at the time.
For 39 years, Iris Bentley has kept a bottle of champagne in the fridge, intending to open it on the day her brother received a free pardon. The bottle remains unopened. Derek Bentley was 19 when he and Christopher Craig were caught trying to rob a warehouse in South London. Craig fired the shots which killed PC Sidney Miles, but at 16 he was too young to hang. Bentley, alleged to have incited him with the words "let him have it," was executed at Wandsworth Prison, despite a recommendation for mercy from the jury. Craig was released from prison after 10 years and is today living in Bedfordshire. The Home Secretary believes the most troubling aspect of the case has always been that Bentley, who didn't actually fire the gun, was executed. But after careful study of the evidence, this was his conclusion.
My judgment in the end, having to take a dispassionate view on an issue which I know obviously arises strong emotions, is that he was rightly convicted of murder. There are no grounds for the exercise of the royal pardon, that it is my judgment that I would have reprieved him had I been Home Secretary at the time.
Mr. Clarke took the unusual step of releasing documents showing that Sir David Maxwell Fyfe, who was Home Secretary in 1953, refused to reprieve Bentley against the advice of a senior official who suggested to him the balance of the argument is in favour of a reprieve. But Sir David's decision was that the law must take its course. For Iris Bentley, who's fought cancer with as much determination as she's fought the Home Office, there was no consolation at all in the new official view that the conviction was right, but the execution wrong.
And I won't give up the campaign, no way. Not until the day I die. And probably I'll even be fighting then on my way out. But I'm not going to give up. No way. He was innocent, and I'm going to fight and fight. If I have to take it abroad, everywhere, I'm going to fight on.
The Bentley family say they will now be petitioning the Queen. The champagne bottle may be going back in the fridge, but they insist the celebration hasn't been cancelled, merely postponed.
The government says the radical changes in sentencing which come into force today will ensure that punishment fits the crime. The new Criminal Justice Act for England and Wales means more community service, fewer but longer jail sentences, and fines which vary depending on a defendant's ability to pay.
The new law will have an immediate impact on people charged with motoring offences. In magistrates' courts, the more you earn, the more you can be fined. So a wealthy driver who goes through a red light can now expect a fine of £300. But if the next man in the dock is out of work, he'll be fined just £12 for doing the same thing. And that worries some magistrates.
I wonder whether, when they walk out of court, whether they will think that's fair, whether they think that for exactly the same offence, a fine of £300 and a fine of £12 is just.
There are radical provisions to deal with young offenders. Parents must attend court and they can be fined if they don't keep youngsters under control. But some mothers say that's impractical.
I'm a one-parent family, as many of us are, and we're already living on limited resources, stretched to the limit, and there's no way we can pay these fines. It'll just mean more parents will be throwing the children out, or more children will be taken into care.
The fundamental aim of the new law is to ensure that prisons are reserved for the most serious criminals. Non-violent offenders will do unpaid work in the community instead.
The public have said for a long time that they want to see punishments that fit the crime. And I think lying behind that has been a very real concern about the punishments available for those who do the worst kind of offence, for example, violent or sexual offences.
But senior judges think the public will see the act differently.
I think they will see that persons who had hitherto would have been sent to prison now will not be sent to prison. That may cause them anxiety and worry, but there's a price to be paid for everything, and if we come to the conclusion, as Parliament has, that the prison population is too high and certain constraints as to sending to prison must now be imposed, that's the price one has to pay.
And the most radical change of all means that prisoners will serve a longer proportion of their sentences, at least a half rather than a third, as some of them do now.
Some local councils have been forced to close public buildings such as libraries and sports centres and take council vehicles off the road after their insurance company froze most of its business. Municipal Mutual Insurance, which provides cover for more than 400 local authorities, is in financial trouble following the breakdown of rescue talks with a European insurance group.
Exeter Council closed its buildings to the public today. Its policy with MMI ran out at noon and it could find no other insurers. Refuse collection ground to a halt as the council's entire fleet of vehicles was withdrawn from service. The Prime Minister's constituency didn't escape. Huntingdon Town Council has only 10 employees, but it's insured with MMI and it shut its town hall as a precaution. In mid-Bedfordshire, the public found leisure centres and swimming pools shut because of the crisis.
So far as the public are concerned, we're not prepared to put them at any risk at all vis-à-vis having accidents in our sports centres and then not being able to claim from us or from our insurance company.
After a morning trying to calm what they felt were unnecessary fears among some councils, local authority officials arrived at MMI's headquarters for crisis talks, conceding later that the country's 9th largest insurance group was unlikely to survive in its present form. But it was the council's problem, they said, not the public's.
If a member of the public has a claim against the council, and that claim is justified if they've fallen over a pavement or whatever, then even if MMI were to go to the wall, which is not very likely as we understand it now, the claim is against the council and the council would have to pay.
More reassurance too for the million people who have individual motor or household insurance policies with MMI, including through the AA. They will be protected whatever happens.
Existing policies remain in force, and over the next week they're going to try and transfer that business to other insurance companies. So it's a worrying time, but not a panicking time as far as the public are concerned.
It's councils who most lose if MMI collapses. In the meantime, they've appealed to insurers to help authorities who find themselves without cover.
The American millionaire Ross Perot has just rejoined the race for the presidency. A few minutes ago, he told a news conference he will be standing as an independent candidate in next month's election. He pulled out of the campaign 2 months ago, despite widespread popular support, arguing that his presence was disruptive. This report just in from Gavin Esler.
Ross Perot is proof that you can fool some of the people all of the time, according to his many detractors. But at his Dallas headquarters a few minutes ago, he announced he's back in the race for the presidency.
The volunteers in all 50 states have asked me to run as a candidate for President of the United States. Jim Stockdale, our vice presidential candidate, and I are honored to accept their request.
Perot claims he is responding to popular demand, but that is simply untrue. Most Americans do not want him to run, and he has spent millions of dollars paying expenses for his supposedly all-volunteer campaign, then claiming he is bowing to their wishes when the decision was really his own. Meanwhile, as Bush and Clinton representatives struggle about how to meet in televised debates, both sides suspect their attempts to woo Perot earlier this week were simply masterful manipulations by the Texas billionaire.
To watch these guys go down and kiss this little man's butt was about one of the most unseemly things I've seen in American politics.
Ross Perot is unlikely to win even a single state, but a few percentage points could make the difference against Bush in states like Texas and Florida, and against Clinton in Michigan and Ohio. Beyond this pattern of total confusion, a Perot candidacy at least should force the other campaigns away from trivial tactical issues like the debates onto important ones like the deficit. Gavin Esler, BBC News, Washington.
Here, the water industry watchdog Ofwat has told all the biggest water companies in England and Wales to reduce their planned price increases. Under the formula established after privatisation, prices are restricted to a set percentage above inflation. Ofwat says these limits must be lowered next year. It means water bills should be an average of 2% lower than predicted.
After decades of neglect, Britain's water industry was privatised and has embarked upon a massive programme of investment. The catch for consumers is that they're having to pay for the £28 billion clean-up. Water bills have gone up by as much as 50% in the 3 years since privatisation. But the recession's driven the cost of the repair work down. Now Ofwat wants those savings passed on. Water bills had been expected to go up by around 5% above inflation next year. Now it'll be inflation plus 3%.
The companies are carrying out their investment programs. I'm monitoring those. Some companies have indeed brought forward their investment programs. I'm delighted about that, but they've been able to do it at lower prices than anticipated, and I think customers should get a benefit from that.
But the water companies believe the cuts are too tough.
Part of the advantage of privatisation was to get away from the Treasury annual review and annual stop-go. We hope that that's not going to happen. I'm sure it isn't, and that, in fact, the Director General is not intending to review prices every year.
The reduction means a benefit of around £4 a year to the average customer, but will put a considerably bigger dent in the water company's buoyant profits. Shares in the privatised water firms are sharply lower tonight.
A 24-year-old Glasgow woman who had an arranged wedding in Pakistan has had her marriage annulled by a Scottish court. Nasreen Ahmal was 14 at the time of the ceremony, and the judge ruled she was underage. It's the first time a Scottish court has been asked to rule on an arranged marriage conducted abroad.
Nasreen Ahmal, arriving with her brother, told the court she'd been taken from Glasgow to Pakistan by her father when she was 14. She'd known nothing of the marriage plans until she was being measured for a dress just days before the ceremony in 1983. Her husband didn't contest the case, and Scotland's highest civil court granted an annulment because as a British national she'd been underage. Afterwards, Nasreen said it was a victory for all Asian women who were seeking to escape arranged marriages.
I know there are a lot of girls waiting to see the outcome of this case. I've been told by my lawyer, and they'll probably come forward now.
Today's decision establishes for the first time the right of a Scottish court to rule on arranged marriages abroad, provided those involved live in Scotland. Lawyers will now proceed with a batch of similar cases. Arranged marriages like this one, filmed in Pakistan last month, are still common among Scotland's 50,000 Asians, and community leaders say the court case does not set a precedent.
The defense has been withdrawn, the man has given in, and there had been no debate in the court on the merits or demerits of an arranged marriage.
Even so, Nasreen Ahmal has angered many in her own community by challenging a tradition many consider central to their culture.
Leeds United could still qualify for the next stage of the European Cup football competition, despite having been beaten in the first round. Leeds thought they'd been knocked out of the competition by Stuttgart, but the German champions fielded an ineligible player in last night's match at Elland Road, and Leeds may now be allowed through in their place.
Leeds, 3-0 down from the first leg, won last night's match by 4-1. But Stuttgart were awarded the 4-all aggregate tie because they'd scored away from home and Leeds hadn't. However, the German squad contained 4 foreign players, one too many according to revised regulations. It might have gone unnoticed but for the late introduction of the fourth, Jovo Simonic.
I really didn't realize that there was 4 foreign players in our team, and therefore I must say it is a big mistake of our side. There is no question about that, but it was no intention in that.
UEFA's final ruling on the admitted error comes tomorrow. At the very least, officials are expected to grant a replay, but they might award Leeds a bye on Stuttgart's disqualification.
Regrettably for Stuttgart, in my opinion, rules are rules, and if rules are broken, then you pay the penalty. The rules are quite clear on the issue.
Yesterday's final whistle had ended one of England's finest club performances in Europe without tangible reward. But now it seems it's the Germans who could be down and out.
The main news again, the Prime Minister has committed Britain to early ratification of the Maastricht Treaty. And in Dallas a few minutes ago, Ross Perot said he would be a candidate for president in November's election. Newsnight on BBC2 at 10:30 features a live interview with the Foreign Secretary, Douglas Hurd. But that's the 9 o'clock news tonight. Good night.
Question time tonight comes from Blackpool and the Labour Party conference, with the party's deputy leader, Margaret Beckett, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Michael Portillo, Liberal Democrat Malcolm Bruce and the Mine Workers leader, Arthur Scargill. In the war of words between government and opposition, your questions and your voice on Question Time tonight at 10:50 on BBC One.
This is BBC One. Now, North News with Simon Willis.
Good evening. An ambulance officer is dead and another is injured after their vehicle was involved in an accident on the way to an emergency call. 38-year-old David Boyd died after being trapped in the wreckage for half an hour. Tony Baker reports.
The accident happened just after 1 o'clock this afternoon. Station Officer Boyd was the front seat passenger in the ambulance driven by his colleague Louise Conway. They were based at the Broom Hill ambulance station in Northumberland, but had moved to the Ashington station on standby and were called out to a road accident in Blyth. As the ambulance drove up a slip road from the A189 road, it collided with the rear and side of a stationary lorry.
We have a number of witnesses already contacted, but I would ask anyone who saw either the broken down lorry before the accident or indeed saw the accident itself to contact any officer of Northumbria Police.
Cleveland County Council says it's outraged that a report on the sinking of a Swedish cargo ship off its coast can't be made public. The SK Link exploded last November, but the fire brigade weren't aware that dangerous chemicals were on board. A spokesman for the Department of Transport said a report could only be made public if it contained safety recommendations. Urgent meetings have been held by councils across the region because of doubts over their insurance. Councillors fear they may no longer be insured for disasters like school fires, following doubts about the future of Municipal and Mutual Insurance, the company insuring 9 out of 10 councils. New insurance arrangements could be expensive, and because of poll tax capping, it could even lead to still further cuts in services. There's to be another crisis meeting of the councils next week. And that is North News. We're back in the morning. Tonight's next news is on BBC Local Radio, and that's at 10 o'clock. The weather now comes from Rob McElwee. From all of us in Newcastle, good night.
Good evening. The satellite pictures have served today just to show how complicated the sky can be at times. Just look at that mess. However, in general, we've seen the cloud thickening during the day, and what sunshine there was, and there has been a good deal, generally get pushed out of the way. However, even an hour or so ago, there were clear skies over Yorkshire and parts of the Midlands. The rain underneath that thicker cloud has also been moving slowly, more northeasterly than easterly, but it's been affecting southwest England, just touching western Wales and up through the Irish Sea, coming into Northern Ireland, and some heavier bursts returning to the Hebrides. So overnight it's going to be the same areas, I think, that will see any of that rain, pushing inland a little bit. Underneath the clearer skies at first, some fog forming, quite possibly in the Vale of York, but generally turning quite misty just about everywhere. Temperature's not dropping that much, underneath that clear sky maybe down to 7, otherwise roughly double figures. Now, by dawn, the wet area, as you're aware, is in the west, mostly light rain, becoming a little bit heavier, I think, further up north in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Gradually the whole lot pushes eastwards, and by the evening, well, spot the holes. There's a good deal of rain in there for many of us. So Friday morning then, we can say that the most likely areas for a sunny start are in the east and probably down the south as well, with pretty wet weather, certainly murky weather up the western side. The heaviest of the rain probably in the north, and some breaks may be coming around in the afternoon, again probably in the south, but there's no guarantee of that. But brighter weather eventually pushing in towards the western part of Northern Ireland. Temperatures disappointing for any time of the year, but the winds thankfully mostly reasonably light. Saturday's chart shows an interesting development in the Gulf of Genoa, or Genoa. As a result, the winds circulate in this direction, but I think on Sunday you'll see a change, although it's a very deep low pressure. There are no fronts around the British Isles, so there is a bit of a difference. Saturday, pretty cloudy day everywhere, the wind picking up here, so pretty cool feeling as well, but I think by Sunday a lot of bright weather will be pushing in across the country. Still feeling pretty cold across this southern quarter though, all those isobars, a lot of winds, and quite a few showers coming as well. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoy your weekend. Good night.
As the controversy continues over NHS hospitals opting out of local authority control, BBC Two's Present Imperfect now focuses on some of the people involved in the application to become a trust by Ealing Hospital in West London.
Any aggro from any of you, and you'll be on your way.
Oh, look here, somebody might come up.
Finding it tough on Civvies Street, are we, Frank? These guys are armed.
Now get your hands up! Do your duty! Don't be a mark! Harry! Take cover!
be your lucky night. Got yours, mate.
Old scores are settled in Civvies, Tuesday 9:30 on BBC1.
Comedy here on One in half an hour as a cantankerous Victor Meldrew continues his struggle with enforced retirement, 1 foot in the grave. Now we reopen the Crimewatch File to examine another case in which police officers reenact past events with the help of real witnesses and actors. The names and identities of the victims have been changed.
Got what I wanted. Now get out.
Over the last 5 years or so, the police and the legal system have evolved a much more sensitive and understanding approach to women who have suffered rape. And as a result, more people have had the courage and the confidence to report what's happened to them. Nevertheless, according to the latest Home Office figures contained in the British Crime Survey report, still only 1 in 5 women report sexual offences. A young woman who was raped in the early hours of Sunday the 28th of October 1990 after leaving a nightclub in Ealing did report the attack, and this film traces the course of the investigation carried out by Hertfordshire Police.
Stop, Hayes. Looks like a girl out there.
Are you sure? She could be anyone.
I said to Hazel, it looks like she's been raped. Thinking that what would a girl be doing at that time of night, on her own in the pouring rain, flagging down cars, unless she had been through something that was horrifying, like a rape.
You hear about people being flagged down under false pretences and then attacked, so I didn't particularly want to stop at first, but I mean, I hadn't actually seen her, but Bemi said she looked really distraught, so I pulled over.
Can you see her?
No, but there's someone else stopping.
Hi, sorry, tell me, did you see a girl back there?
Yeah, we did.
Was she anything to do with you?
No, that's why we've stopped.
Shall we perhaps get out and take a look, see how she is?
Yeah. You all right? What's happened? Please don't hurt me.
It's okay, he's with us. She won't hurt you.
I'll give him a jacket.
What's your name? When she saw Steve, she was really frightened, presumably because he was male, until Bemi said to her that he was with us, and then she seemed to accept him better. But she was in a really bad way.
And then he just stopped the car. And I just struggled. I just tried so hard, and he just kept grabbing my throat all the time, trying to strangle me, grabbing me. And I had my necklace on and I didn't want him to break it.
PH Charlie 2, Yankee 2 for urgent circulation from M25 westbound junction 19. A Ford Cortina colour red. 1 occupant, male, IC1, starched, Northern Ireland, Irish accent. Circulation police, Metpole, Thames Valley. 3 Yankee 3, all received.
At the hospital, Sarah was examined by a female doctor. She was then interviewed by Detective Constable Joe West, who's specially trained to deal with victims of sex offences.
I know you must be really tired by now, and it's not going to be easy to talk to me,
but I need to know exactly what's happened to you this evening before we can let you go home. Had you been anywhere else before you went to the nightclub?
I'd been out to a party with some friends. Then I went on to a nightclub and I met some other friends from work there.
And the man that attacked you, was he at the nightclub or the party? Did you know him at all? Have you ever met him before?
I don't know him. The first time that I saw him was when I came out of the club. It was closing. I was meant to be getting a lift home with some friends. But it was closing and I couldn't find him anywhere.
Have you seen Ian or Alan anywhere? They're supposed to give me a lift home.
They drove off just down there. If you run, you'll catch them.
Do you want me to give you a lift home?
No thanks, I'm waiting for friends.
That's no problem.
Look, I'm waiting for friends.
Would you mind if I walk with you? Where do you live then?
Look, I'm meeting friends.
It looks like you missed them. Look, I live in Southall, but I can give you a lift wherever you want. I mean, where do you live?
I don't live near you, I live in Harrow. But I'm staying with friends.
All right. Look, here's my car here. You sure you don't want that lift?
Look, I'm going to St Albans.
Look, I've told you, it doesn't matter. I'll take you wherever you want to go. Look, do you want a cigarette? Come on.
Let me go!
I wasn't really scared of him at first. I didn't want to be in his car, but I didn't think that he was going to do what he actually did to me.
Look, you're not scared of me, are you? Look, I told you, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just holding your hand now. You don't mind that, do you? If I tried to kiss you, you'd slap me, right?
Yeah. Please, I want to get out.
See, women, they hear my accent, they won't even talk to me. Just walk away.
Why, because you're Irish?
Yeah.
I thought he wouldn't do anything if I kept him talking, and if I pretended that I was friends with him, that he wouldn't get angry with me and he'd let me go.
My uncle's from Coleraine in Londonderry. Where are you from?
Me? I'm from a village about 20 miles from Coleraine. You Irish?
Yeah, from Tipperary. Ireland's really nice.
Nah, you can say that again. I tell you, as soon as I finish my exams, I'm going straight back there. Now, come on! Don't worry! Come on! Smile!
When we were driving along, I was nervous about being in his car. And I saw things like the radio was different to most cars. It wasn't up in the dashboard, it was down low. And I just noticed things like the seats and the cigarettes he smoked and what sort of music he was playing in the car.
You like the old Irish country and western then?
Not much.
I listen to it all the time. There's quite a few places where you can go and see it live. Hey, see? Don't mind me holding your hand now, do you?
I want to go to St Albans. Please, let me out.
Look, I told you. Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you.
But less than half an hour later, on a slip road of the M25, he held Sarah down by her throat and raped her in the car. Then he pushed her out and left her there.
Before it happened, I'd always said that I wouldn't come forward, that I'd go home and I wouldn't tell anyone. But where I was left, I had no choice but to tell someone.
Hello, Force Technum.
Yes, good morning to you. I'm DS Adams.
Yeah, she was at Ealing Broadway, the nightclub there, on Saturday night. But she was with a group of your employees. It's basically your office staff we need to speak to. They spent some while with her that night. But after she left the nightclub, the incident room was based at Watford. This is where the offence had been committed. But we knew most of our inquiries would be in West London, as Sarah had been picked up in Ealing, and the offender had claimed that he lived in Southall. Of course, he could have been lying, but the most important thing was our inquiries were to start in West London.
Yes, on an unattended vehicle, Lammas Park Gardens, West 5.
We asked the Metropolitan Police for their help in locating the red Ford Cortina. Uniform officers conducted a street search in and around Southall and Ealing, but unfortunately they failed to locate the offender's car.
Well, the bloke had a Londonderry accent. He said he came from near Coleraine, so he might already be in your system. Yeah, he said he's done this thing before. Yeah, white male, early 20s.
He's early 20s, short black hair with a small black moustache. We know he drives a red Cortina, but we're unsure of the model at this stage.
Now, we've got to a certain stage now. I've got a rather fairly round face here. Would you say it should be longer at all?
No, he had a very round face and a square chin.
And a square chin. Now, are we anywhere near the sort of shape there? I'm going to put his eyes about there. That's the sort of position I'm planning. Big, little?
Small.
Smallish?
And thick, dark eyebrows.
And thick eyebrows?
Yeah.
Good. Do you think they should be stronger still? I started off back in 1966. In the first 2 or 3 I did, I was very fortunate. I hit the target on the bullseye in those days, Tommy Steele had a manager. I can't remember his name now, but he got murdered on Hungerford Bridge. And they got the villain for it, and I was very delighted. I went to the case, went to the Old Bailey, and it was spot on, and that I felt rather pleased with.
You had a moustache just above the mouth.
A moustache? Big one, fairly black?
Yeah, dark, like his hair.
I always try and do it within 2 hours. I hope within 1. You don't want to make the witness tired. And also, there's another side to this also. You may spoil what you've got. One has to play it by ear, as they say here, because it depends on the case, it depends on the sort of person that comes. They may be very extrovert, and then with those you can be slightly jokey sometimes, and that helps. But the rape cases are slightly more difficult. Maybe it's happened the day before. Sometimes, sadly, they burst into tears or something. And I feel rather, I've had 2 reactions there, of course, because one is I must forget him here. And the other, of course, is to see the sadness of the case.
How about this one? Is that anything like it? No, that's a Sierra. Look, I know the one I'm looking for. It's a Cortina Saloon, just like my dad's. And the seats are definitely cloth. They're not leather. Is there anything here that's like it? No, nothing. Don't worry, there's plenty more places to try. How about this one, Sarah? This is like it. The steering wheel had 4 spokes, and the dashboard was higher on the driver's side.